So I apologize in advance for this intro. I'm getting loopy. It's that point in the semester. But Karissa, I've known Karissa since her undergraduate years. She had a wide-eyed youthfulness to her, even though she's way older than you think and has a bunch of kids. And after working with her, it didn't surprise me that her thesis would be a young adult novel. Now, the novel is set in the Southwest, New Mexico specifically, and I lived in Phoenix for almost 15 years before moving here. Having lived that experience in Arizona and having read Carissa's novel, I can truly say the desert is awful. And I mean both of those syllables. It's full of awe. It is a menacing arena, absent of mercy, potentially fatal, yet unequivocally stunning. Karissa describes the setting as a flat, barren land, the cactus flowers beautiful yet dangerous, waiting for an arrogant fool to prick their finger on its thorns. She evokes that ominous sense of the environment throughout her novel with precision. It is the sense of dread that pushes the narrative along with the tender relationships between the characters. To explain the feeling, I need to use another lived experience. So here it gets a little weird. So in Black churches, at least the Southern Baptist Black churches I attended in my youth, there is a thing that happens during the sermon. So the pianist will chime in with a chord to emphasize particular moments in the speech where the preacher is really getting to a poignant concept. So example, so the preacher will say righteousness and the pianist will hit the note, or everlasting life, and you'll hear. So I hear these notes whenever stories have certain elements, like gays, or people of color, people with disabilities. So they sing to me, okay? So Karissa has produced a song for us. The relationship between the main character and her brother is wonderful. She writes, Adam and I may have acted like we were joined at the hip, but we weren't the same age. Even though I was the one that looked after him, Adam was 3 years older than me. People often thought I was older. The Down syndrome always made his face appear several years younger than he was, which was part of the reason why people treated him like a child. Dad in particular acted like it was a disease, a virus, something that would eventually go away if we kept Adam in a bubble. Of course, that wasn't true, and he would always be youthful in appearance and mind. There were worse things, if you ask me. Amen to that. So to be honest, though, I'm at a difficult point in my life as a reader. If a book doesn't have lesbians in space, I don't have the time. But there are no lesbians in space in this novel, but there are complicated humans in a vast and treacherous environment. For that, I certainly have the time. To me, centering queer community, my queer community, is everlasting life, and highlighting the stories of people with disabilities is nothing less than the song of righteousness. And I applaud Karissa for doing both and welcome stories like hers to be enjoyed by us all. I introduce you to Karissa Ellison.
Thank you so much, Venita. Tall lady, sorry. So I wanted to thank everyone for putting this on tonight. You all do such a wonderful job. Wow, we are finally here. The last 3 years have been a whirlwind with many ups and downs. If I cry, we needed more shots. But if there's one thing that I know, I couldn't have gotten to where I am today without the help of these people. It takes a village, as they say, and I'm beyond grateful to have been a part of it. Thank you to my chair, Venita Blackburn, and to my other committee members, Tanya Nichols back there, and Ronald Reagan, which is not here tonight, and for their mentoring, their support, and their dedication to the story. Thank you to Stephen Church for putting up with my neuroses over the years. I know I can be a pain in the ass. Thank you to Jefferson for your encouragement and support over the last 3 years, especially the dog pics. They made me laugh just when I needed it the most. And to the rest of the MFA faculty, thank you for your support and guidance throughout this journey. Thank you to my friends Melinda and Sydney. Our friendship has saved me more times than I can count throughout our time in the program together. And to all my peers, thank you. I can't wait to read your published book someday. A huge thank you to my husband Joey, and our daughters Riley and Callie. I only have 2. For giving me the space and time that I needed to complete this journey. I couldn't have done it without the 3 of you in my corner. Thank you to my mother for always believing in me. and my stepdad Dave for helping with the kiddos in a pinch. And finally, to my dachshund, Sir Arthur Barrington, he has to be named, he's in my bio, for keeping my butt warm and for giving me back pain. He's been my constant companion throughout writing this book. I'm proud to share my office chair with him. So this story is dedicated to my brother Kevin, who is no longer with us, and I hope you're running fast and flying high wherever you are. So for context, I'll read before I read an excerpt from my novel. It's a young adult novel, fantasy novel called Double Mirage. And this story is a coming of age story about 16-year-old Soleil Avina, and there goes my nose, as she discovers her identity and autonomy through a tumultuous journey into the secret world of the doubles. After making the heartbreaking choice to leave her brother Adam with Down syndrome behind, she stumbles into this new world tucked away into the mountains of Santa Fe National Forest, only to discover that she has been cursed with a split soul and a double with a snarky attitude and an unlikely half-lizard people. Despite their issues with each other, Soleil and her double, London, must travel back in time to break the curse and save themselves and their friends. That's my synopsis. Okay, so I'll begin. Yeah. Oh, thanks. After grabbing my steaming cup of coffee from the countertop, I swiveled around and ran smack dab into someone. "Oh my gosh, I'm sorry," I said, before looking up from the spilled coffee on the floor. When I finally glanced up at their face, two blinking yellow eyes stared at me from under a black hood. It was of human shape, neither male nor female, I couldn't be sure. The ceramic coffee cup slipped out of my hand and dropped to the floor, shattering into pieces. Those eyes, they weren't right. They rapidly shuttered, blinking thin flaps of skin that pulled at the flat, snake-like skin between their eyes. It grabbed my arm and squeezed hard, forcing my gaze to look down at the human-shaped hand covered in green and yellow scales. There was a tiny outline of a snake tattooed in black ink on the inside of their wrist. The more I stared at it, the more the snake seemed to move on its own. My eyes went wide when I realized the scales weren't tattoos, but bumpy, like rubber. I felt cemented to the spot, my body heavy as I forced myself to look back up. By that time, they were gone, their lean body already turning away from me. Though the pressure of their hand was no longer there, I felt the grip imprinted on my wrist like a ghost. Heat spread over my forearm, then down to my wrist as I watched the black hooded figure race out the glass doors of the sagebrush and into the crowds lining the plaza. "Soleil, Soleil," Adam's squat frame bumped up against me, trying to get my attention. His voice sounded as if something had trapped it inside a bubble, like everything else around me that had paused in slow motion. For what felt like minutes was only seconds. I watched his mouth form words I should have heard, concern etched into the upward slant of his eyes. The corner of the top of my hand burned like it was on fire. And just like that, the moment passed and everything rushed back into place. Cups and plates banged in the kitchen. The buzzing from the cappuccino machine hummed around us. Adam kept trying to get me to respond, his voice rising above a whisper. I scratched at the back of my hand as a dull ache replaced the burn and wrapped Adam around the shoulders in a reassuring hug. I knew it would happen if I didn't calm him down. "Adam, it's okay. I'm okay. See?" I patted myself with my hands and then brushed back my long black curls. To change the subject, I gestured to the cup on the ground. "I spilled my latte is all. See, I'm fine." But was I fine? The top of my hand stung as if sunburn from a long day spent poolside, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd seen them before, those eyes. The coffee house was near the plaza, a square-shaped marketplace that held year-round local festivities in Santa Fe, New Mexico. They designed the buildings as adobe-like structures featuring several Gothic and adobe-styled cathedrals. Most of the homes in Santa Fe follow a traditional adobe style, especially those around the plaza or on Canyon Road. Everything about the city was magical and eccentric. I mean, our state was famous for aliens, after all. What more could you want? Between the green, snowy mountains and cacti-infested deserts, Few people get the option to snowboard or on sand or snow. It was my favorite place to be, not that I'd been anywhere outside of New Mexico. As I lifted my canvas bag over my shoulder, I watched my brother end his shift, wiping down all the tables, refilling the sugar packets and ketchup bottles, and wave goodbye to the evening shift that was clocking in on the computer. Adam rode his scooter a few feet in front of me, swerving in and out of the cracks in between the sidewalk. All the while, images of those blinking yellow eyes and the green-scaled hand on my arm replayed in my mind over and over. I rubbed at the tingling sensation on the back of my hand and pulled on the sleeve of my shirt to cover it as a light itching worked its way up to my elbow. I stopped walking to look at it. There, in the crescent of my hand, were light pink tracks running up to my elbow, like gorged creek beds. "Come on, sis," said Adam, before I could pull the sleeve up anymore. I raced after him towards home, my bag hitting my thigh with every heavy footfall. Our house was a 20-minute walk from Sagebrush Cafe, just on the edge of downtown. We'd lived with our parents in that house since before I could remember, and we still lived there with him and his newish wife, Kathy. Dad married our stepmonster a few years after our mother left for a retreat in Taos 6 years ago, and then decided we weren't good enough of a reason for her to come home. Kathy often spent her time away from home, preferring Bible study over two stepkids, though she made damn sure that we followed her militant rules. Sometimes it was hard to blame her, though. Dad was a hard man to live with, often gone on business trips or passed out from a night of binge drinking, leaving us to fend for ourselves. Once we were inside the house, I threw my canvas bag onto our beige couch and called down the hall to let Kathy know we were home. No answer. I shrugged and walked into the kitchen to scrounge up dinner for us before starting on my homework. Adam crashed onto the living room floor with his video game controller and called Alexa to turn on the TV. While I scrambled up eggs for dinner, I noticed the itch on my arm moving toward my hand. I rubbed at it in between stirs, and then when I couldn't stand it anymore, I pulled back the sleeve. There on the back of my hand and between my thumb and forefinger was a small pink mark. It was shaped in a curved line about 1.5 inches long, with a head and a tail. If I didn't know any better, I'd say it looked like a snake, and it was like the mark on that person, the one that grabbed me in the coffee house. No? What the hell? The smell of burnt eggs hit my nose and I pulled my sleeve back down. Damn it, I burnt the eggs, Adam. Sorry, bud. I threw the pan on the other side of the stove to let it cool and rummaged through the freezer, ignoring the pictures of Kathy and my dad taped to the door. How happy their smiles appeared. Lies. How do veggie nuggets sound? No answer. I grabbed the box and walked around the kitchen table into the living room, its walls painted a stark white, since Kathy hated anything other than perfection. Adam, I said, do you want veggie nuggets? He was standing at the front door, wide open, looking down at something in his right hand. Someone just dropped this off for you, he said, and held out a small white envelope to me without taking his eyes away from the front door. Who? I took the letter out of his hand, careful not to touch him, for fear that he would notice that my palms were sweating. Written on the front in elegant scroll was my name, Soleil Avina. I flipped it over. No address or return address written anywhere on the outside. 2 identical snakes were embossed on the envelope in silver filigree. Adam, who dropped this off? I don't know, he said with a shrug, and closed the blue front door. Adam walked back over to a spot on the red clay-colored tiles and unpaused Mortal Kombat. Impatience rove over every inch of my skin as I continued to push buttons on an imaginary world while I stood there in real life. Didn't he understand I needed answers? Adam, I grabbed his shoulder and turned him half around so that he would see the pleading in my eyes. What do you want, sis? I'm getting to the next level. He turned back to the game. Who the hell was at the front door? I asked. I don't know. I couldn't see their face. But Adam paused and glanced over his shoulder at the door, almost like he thought someone was listening to us. He motioned me closer with his hand and whispered into my ear. Their back was to me, and they dressed different, like they were from my video game. What do you mean different? They wore a long black cloak with a hood pulled down to cover their face. Maybe they get cold easily, I offered. He shrugged, and the soft cotton of his t-shirt rubbed against my arm. I wondered if maybe Adam had misjudged them, if his imagination was seeing a cloak when really it was like a long jacket the human figure was wearing. You didn't ask who they were. Without warning, Adam reached his arms around me easily and squeezed so hard that we fell over onto our sides in a fit of giggles, leaving me slightly breathless. It was hard to stay angry with him. You're ridiculous, I laughed, getting back on my feet. Come on, sis. Jeez, take a chill pill. It's not like it was a real snake. Adam sat up and pressed start on his game. He didn't understand how much the letter creeped me out. It wasn't his fault. I never told him about the mark, the creature. As I stared at the back of his head, brown, shaggy hair tucked behind his ears, my heart tugged at my chest. There was no chance that I could share any of this with him without freaking him out. It was better to play it off, to lie and act like nothing else was going on. If I was honest with myself, then I'd admit that I really didn't want to explain it either. Adam wrapped a pair of headphones around the top of his head. Most of the time, he wore them to help with sensory overload. And years of being his little sister taught me that this was his way of telling me he was done talking, more like the middle finger. And just like that, he zoned out on his game, pretending that I didn't exist. So, veggie nuggets it is then, I said under my breath, and then coughed into the crook of my elbow to clear the remains of our laughter out of my throat. Without pestering him further, I stuffed the letter into the pocket of my jean shorts and walked back into the kitchen to turn on our old stove. As close as we were, I should have been able to tell Adam that I was afraid. That lizard men and capes were things found in small black hidey hole caves in fantasy novels, not things that stood on our front doorstep. I sighed, realizing how ridiculous it all sounded in my head, let alone saying it out loud. The oven preheat light wouldn't come on, so I banged on the top of it with the edge of my fist a few times, mimicking the step monster. Our house was in an older part of Santa Fe, opposite of the more industrial center of town. Keeping up with the Adobe-style tradition with its red clay exterior and traditional Adobe-style fireplace in the main living room, I could still see my mom sitting on the rug next to the fireplace, papers scattered around her, scrolling on her laptop. It never occurred to me to ask her what she was reading. I was just happy to sit and watch her while I played with my brother's old toy trucks on the tile. Sometimes when I walk past my parents' bedroom, I'll get a whiff of her spicy perfume and my mind will flood with memories. Dad never gave me a reason why we stayed here, a place full of memories of her. Maybe he thought they'd fall away with a new wife, a new mother. Maybe he thought she'd come back. Not like he was here long enough for me to ask. Instead, he was always far away, fixing someone else's problems while ignoring the ones he left at home. That's it.